welcome back to Adobe Live. It is so good to see you. Happy New Year. Happy 2021. We are back for our very first drawing and painting live stream of the year. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Today, our wonderful guest is the amazing visual development artist, Isaac Orloff. How are you doing today, Isaac? It's so good to see you.
I'm doing great. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Welcome everyone. It's so good to see you. Fairy, hi. General Kenobi, it is a pleasure as always to have you in chat. Michelle, Dan Phillips, Ariana, welcome. Valder. Let us know, everyone, where you are tuning in from, as well as on YouTube. If you're over there, don't forget to hop over to Behance, behance.net/live, so we can read all of your questions. That is the chat that we are reading. If you have any questions for Isaac along the way, you can just type it over there and I can relay it to him. But yeah, before we get into Isaac's intro of his wonderful work, let's check out the schedule for the rest of the day. So right now we have the drawing and painting stream, of course, with Isaac Orloff. Then next we have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Andrew Hockrattle. Then after that we have the mobile app design with Codi Brown. Then the XD Daily Creative Challenge with Andrea Epi. And then we have a creative encore for the Design in the Dark with Huspa Design. If we could go ahead and just take a look at your portfolio, maybe you can give an intro to the viewers to kind of so they can get an idea of who you are and what kind of art you make.
Yeah, as we said before, I'm a visual development artist. For those that don't know, that means I work in animation and I do a lot of design for the kind of first parts of what animated TV shows and movies look like. We design the look and feel of movies and animation, and we go into designing the actual assets and environments and lighting that actually end up becoming an animated movie. So on my website, which I have pulled up right here, you can see some of my personal work. I do a lot of work that's based on traveling and locations I've been to. I love to paint from life, and I shoot a lot of reference photos from places I've been. So if you do scroll through my site, you'll end up probably, recognizing some locations from around the West Coast mostly, a lot of San Francisco stuff. And then if you go back up to the top, you can go to production work. And then you can kind of see some shows I've worked on. The most recent one is DreamWorks Wizards, and you can see what some actual visual development work looks like, kind of the behind the scenes concept art and production assets that all get made to a film.
Very cool. I have actually been following your work for like the past 5 years. Huge fan. Your work is always so lovely, especially my favorites of your work are your little A-frame cabin illustrations. I love those so much.
I can pull that up right here, actually. I think if you scroll down here, you'll start to see some locations.
Oh yeah, so pretty.
A lot of San Francisco. Love San Francisco and A-frames.
There's some A-frames, yeah.
Love cabins, outdoorsy stuff. So
Same.
I think a lot of artists, you can kind of tell the stuff they love by what they put in their work, and it's no different with me as well.
That one, yep. I think that was the very first piece that I ever saw of yours.
I think that's my most popular piece of art I've ever done.
Awesome. So if you could go ahead and maybe just give a little intro to what we'll be working on today.
Yeah, so today I'm going to be working on a piece based on a location that I went to earlier this year called Angel's Landing. I was really taken aback by going there. I'm going to zoom in actually so we can see my reference photo. I was taken aback by how beautiful this place is. I did it first thing in the morning to catch the sunrise, and it was a moment that really stood out to me, and I've been meaning to draw it, and I felt like this was maybe a good time to do it. So I'm going to use my photo and do a piece based on this.
Absolutely. That place is gorgeous. I would love to go there someday. I'm a huge fan of national parks personally. So yeah, so wonderful.
Great. Yeah. I'd love to hear what, some of our viewers, what their favorite national parks are, or what some of the more popular ones are as well.
Absolutely. Hey, Kirsty, welcome. Mia, Stasia, welcome. So good to see you guys. Jacob is in the chat as well. Hi, Jacob.
All right. So I'm going to get started here. Basically, I'm going to be approaching this like a painting, as if I would be painting from life, but I have the ability to do it from the comfort of my home, which is really great. A lot of people use photos as reference. I recommend it to everyone. If you take your own, I love taking my own. I feel like when you take your own photos, you get you can understand the vibe of how it felt when you're taking other people's photos. That's useful too. But a lot of times it's really good to remember how something feels, because you can put that extra bit of information into your work, and it gets a little static when you're just using a photo that you haven't actually been there. So I love to use photos from places that I've been, and that's what I'm going to be doing today.
That's very true. You can definitely put that love and those feelings that you experienced when you're actually physically in that space, rather than just, you know, taking an image off of Google and redrawing it. But when you've actually physically experienced the environment, you can really add those small details that you might have seen in person.
That being said, I mean, I use photos from Google every day for work, you know, because sometimes you can't just go everywhere at the drop of a hat, especially with, you know, COVID times. It's a challenge to get out and see the things you want to see. But you know, there's a lot of good, you know, stock photo stuff that you can find as well. The internet is basically an endless source of inspiration for, you know, paintings and art making in general.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically laying in kind of a lot of the shadow colors. I'm going to start, there's a lot of like really cool lighting coming in, but I like to leave that for last. So I'm going to kind of start messy and loose and working. I had the liberty of kind of creating some base shapes before we started, just to save a little bit of time, so you didn't have to see me painting in flat color. But yeah, this is kind of a really fun painterly method. There's a lot of different ways to work. I feel like when I'm working for myself, I end up working a little bit looser, and then when I have to work for work, I end up doing stuff that is quite a bit tighter, and I have to really think about how I can change things down the line if needed, because feedback is a big thing. You don't get much feedback when you're working for yourself, so I can be a little looser and crazier when I'm doing my own thing, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. So basically you start with the dark shadows and then just or dark colors, and you kind of just like build it up from there.
Yeah, I like to start kind of in the middle. You know, this looks really dark, but I actually have some, I'm gonna bring in some kind of midtones on the right. I really want this kind of really amazing shape that's up here. Like, I really want this part. I'm going to draw over this real quick so you can see. When I look at this image, I'm basically seeing that this shape right here is what I really want to focus on. This light shape right here. So I think a little bit later on, you're going to see these shapes really come out. But right now I'm focusing on all these little areas that are really dark, and there's not actually that much value difference between them. So it might look muddy to start, but I think when you're working on a painting, it's kind of like you work on all of it at once, and it kind of slowly all rises up to completion, instead of just having, focusing on one little area and at a time.
Yeah,
basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Mia in chat is asking, is Isaac using a tablet?
Yeah, I'm using Cintiq, actually. I'm using a Wacom Cintiq 22 HD. I've had this for quite a long time. The Cintiqs are really, really good pieces of equipment, and they last a really long time. I think I'm approaching double-digit years maybe with this one. It's crazy how long these things last.
Yeah.
But the new ones that come out are just unbelievable, and I'm definitely thinking about upgrading to one of the newer models, because the color and the size is just pretty great. What do most people work on? Do you find that a lot of people work on Cintiqs, or what are some of the listeners? Do a lot of people work on Cintiqs or iPads, or what's popular nowadays to work on?
For me personally, I've actually always worked on an Intuos Pro. I find that I draw better when I'm not drawing on a screen, weirdly enough. I know that's not a very common thing.
It's more common than you'd think.
Really?
Actually,
I don't know. I always feel like people are like, how can you draw like that?
No, I know that there's some professional artists that still use Intuos. Like, some people just feel really comfortable with it. And when the bottom line is, when you're being creative, you want to work with something that's, most comfortable to you. So if you're working on something where there's kind of like a little bit of a barrier where you don't feel comfortable, you're going to work slower and you're not going to feel as creative. So a lot of people really just stick with what they know for a long time.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel. I just recently got my very first iPad like last month, I think. So I'm just starting to get used to using all the hand gestures and stuff like that, which is a brand new frontier for me as an artist. So I'm learning like Adobe Fresco and stuff like that. And I'm enjoying it a lot, but it's definitely a learning curve when being so used to having like the express keys and keyboard shortcuts. It's just a different experience.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different way of thinking. I feel like you have to, when you're using your phone, it's all about your fingers and touch. And this is a bit more menu oriented. So it can be difficult to go back and forth between different UIs, but I feel like we're really in somewhat of I'd say like a golden age of digital drawing, because we have so many different tools available to us, and like mobile options. For the first time, we have like real mobile options for drawing, and it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. People in chat say Cintiq, Intuos Pro, says Wade. Thomas says Cintiq 22-inch. Steven says a lot of people use the Bamboo, or the Wacom One. Definitely, that's a great starter tablet as well.
Oh yeah, that's the new one, I think.
Yeah,
one of the newer ones.
I even know professional artists that use the Wacom One. Just like Isaac just said, you kind of just get a tool and you stick with what you know and just stick with what's comfortable. And yeah, all the Wacom tablets are really great.
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting the 16 so I can have one for traveling. I think that would be a lot of fun, just to be able to pack up a workstation and move somewhere else for a little while to do some work. I think that'd be a blast. It's hard to bring the really big tablets with you when you're traveling around. What other stuff have you tried other than the Intuos? Have you tried any? I know you have the iPad, but have you tried any other types of tablets, or just those? There's so many out there.
Yeah, actually, no. The very first tablet that I ever got was just a Wacom Intuos. I just happened to get it on sale at Staples. I wasn't even in the market for a tablet, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get it and I'm gonna try digital art, and I've been using an Intuos ever since.
My first one was an impulse buy. I was at a CTN Animation Expo in Burbank, I think, 8 years ago, maybe. No, 10 years ago, something, a long time ago. And they were selling them, and I had only used an Intuos, and I just was in the moment, and I don't think I even had the money for it. I just got all swept up in the hype, and I bought it, and they shipped it to me on the East Coast. I was living on the East Coast at the time. And it was a real rush for me. I felt like it was like my first real big investment in my career, and it's a good feeling when you can spend that kind of money on your passion.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an investment too. If you're using it for your work, you're going to be making money off of that tool as well.
Oh, of course. Yeah, they're very good investments, and as we said before, they last a really long time.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Mia is asking, is he putting each color on a different layer?
So right now, I like to group my layers by kind of, right now I do kind of background to foreground. So I'm using these like kind of really big shapes. And then what I'll do is I'll lay in color variations, and then I'll merge them together once I kind of like what it's doing. I don't like to put everything on one layer, because if I make a mark and I'm not really I go kind of too far, sometimes it can be difficult to undo what I've done. So I like to keep everything separate and then combine as I go. It's kind of I usually end up with way too many layers. It's kind of my own. Yeah, I know. It's so easy to get up into like the thousands of layers if you're doing these like really, really intense background paintings. I try to avoid it as best I can, but it's just one of those things that kind of tends to happen, whether I like it or not.
Yeah, I usually keep all of my separate colors, like individual colors on each separate layer too, and then I'll tell myself one time that oh, I don't need to put that on a separate layer, and I always regret it. So
yeah, and then everyone has the times where you end up basically getting almost to the near finish of something, and then you realize that there's just nothing you can do. Like there's no amount of Control Z that will
Yes.
undo what, you know, all the layers you've added. You just get so in the zone sometimes. There's the wonders of being creative. And, you know, I'd love to know like what kind of gets people in their flow. I know getting in that kind of like really cool, hyper focused zone is something that's kind of difficult to do for creatives. I know there's like different things for me. I find that listening to stories is one of my favorite things to do. I'd love to hear like what are some other things that people do to like kind of get themselves, their creativity flowing.
Yeah, totally, you guys. Let us know like what inspires you, what helps you keep motivated and keep focused while you're working on your artwork. For me, I usually like I can't really watch like YouTube or listen to podcasts or anything because I'll just get too distracted. I usually will go to YouTube and pop up a like an ASMR environment sound, like nature sounds and stuff like that.
Oh,
So it's just like
interesting.
quiet, like rain in the background to kind of just like give some sound, but it's not super distracting.
I like that. I mean, obviously I love nature noises because I'm guilty as charged, a nature boy. But I definitely think that ambient sounds is really good when there's stuff that you need to design. I can listen to shows and movies and things like that if I'm doing a very specific type of work. And that would be like rendering, because rendering uses a little bit less. I don't know if it's a different part of the brain or what, but I can kind of sit back and just kind of go through the motions of filling in color.
Right.
But if I'm actually designing where I have to come up with like a lot of decision making and things like that, then it's really difficult for me to listen to anything that's like super, you know, requires like there's plot twists and story changes. You know, I can't focus on both things at once. It's kind of impossible for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. When I'm in my sketching process, it takes a lot more brain power. But once I get to the coloring process, it's just kind of like I'm coloring in a coloring book. It's very easy, second nature.
Yeah, I agree. What are some other things that people said?
Let's see.
We get any responses?
Bruce says getting out in nature. Maybe he takes a break in between doing artwork and kind of taking a breath. I know I always feel inspired when I go out into nature. Anime Elephant says I always put on white noise of a certain environment and that really inspires me. Same, in the same boat.
Yeah,
Emily says just sometimes music or just being outside. Yeah.
I know I like to take breaks. I think taking breaks is definitely important. You know, I'll work for 4 or 5 hours at a time and it'll be really, really intense. And then you just kind of get a point where your brain is like, okay, you know, I think I've had enough.
Yeah.
And you just kind of need to reset and get some outside time.
Yeah.
And it makes a world of difference. I know that working from home has allowed me to do that a bit more. But it's definitely something that I love doing if I can.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes when I'm working and so zoned in, I'll just like hit a wall of tiredness. I'm just like, okay, I need to take a break now. In terms of your color picking, are you just kind of eyeballing it with what colors that just kind of look right to you, or are you color picking from the photo? How are you going about doing that?
Sometimes I'll color pick from the photo because it's very helpful. Right now, I'm kind of trying to make my own color choices. I've put the reference photo up here in the upper left-hand corner so people can kind of see what I'm pulling from. But I'd like to do stuff that's a little bit more organic and a little brighter and more colorful. So I'm choosing my colors in a different fashion than color picking. Color picking is actually a really good tool because it allows you to understand the color relationships, because sometimes how things look and the color that they actually are is extremely different. So when you actually go and click on it, you'll realize, oh, wow, this is not what I expected this to be at all. So I'm kind of looking and kind of thinking about where I want it to go, and basically just kind of pull some base colors that are going to be the shadows, and then thinking I'm going to be kind of affecting them with some color effects afterwards to kind of bring in a little bit more saturation afterwards.
For sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Also getting things like I'm starting with yellow in the background here, even though the sky is blue, it is a warm light. So I really want to have some like little bits of yellow that show through. And I think that will kind of help me get this like really nice, like warm effect that I want to have coming up from the horizon. So it's a little bit of like just leaving a little bit of texture in there is a nice little trick to get that warm glow that I'm going to be looking for down the line.
Very cool. It's almost like an underpainting.
Yeah, exactly. This is really, that is the word for this, is underpainting.
Cool.
Start messy and loose, and then I feel like paintings are kind of like growing up, in that like you start not really knowing what you're doing, you probably make a lot of mistakes, and then you get a little older, you start to refine a little bit, and then you're like, oh, okay, I don't really have that much time, so I'm going to get really focused and figure out exactly what I want to do.
A couple of people in chat are asking what brush that is, because it's really awesome.
Yeah, so the brushes I'm using are actually the all the stock Adobe brushes for the most part. They're Kyle's gouache brushes. I've actually am a little bit new to using these. They're really great, and I think that the amount of customization that's available in them is for me, it was almost overwhelming. Like, it's just really, really cool how much you can do. So I'm getting to know them right now. And then what I do is when I am looking for new brushes to use, what I'll do is I'll basically just tell myself, okay, today's the day that you're going to learn new brushes, and I'll sit down for like an hour or two and I'll go down a list and I'll just try as many of them as I can on a blank, kind of like a blank slate, and then pick out maybe 4 or 5 ones that I really like. And then go from there. I think having too many brushes can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. So picking what you are comfortable with and when that works for you is really important, because like I said before, any way that you can be creative, or any inhibitors to being creative kind of like distracts from your flow. And I think that's an important thing to avoid if you can.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And that is very relatable to your finding new brush mentality and the way you go about it, because I do the exact same thing. Sometimes I'll just get bored of a brush, and Kyle has like just these huge lists of brush, and I'll just kind of like randomly pick some and just try them out and see what works and what doesn't work. And that's kind of how I find my new brushes.
Yeah, I've gone through a lot of brushes over the years, and I think that recently I had this kind of feeling where I just kind of felt like my work was stagnant. I wasn't feeling the vibe for whatever reason, and messing around with new brushes, kind of like I almost felt like it breathed new life into the stuff that I was working on, and all of a sudden I just was like really excited to sit at my desk again and start working. And it's all about the tools. When you have the right tools, it can really make you feel alive, at your desk, and it's a really great feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
You can kind of see as I lay in the sky color here, although the colors are kind of muddy in the foreground, it's starting to give a little bit more depth and break apart. Adding in the sky and adding in some of the background hills really, starts to give us a feel for where we're going with this down the road.
Yeah, the adding in the sky just like completely changed the whole image now. Like, it really brightened it up, and it's a sunny, happy day, and we'll just start adding in the highlights here.
The sky is like the secret weapon. I feel like everything could just kind of look like a big mess until the sky goes in, and you're like, oh, okay. It's almost like a landmark. You just know where you are all of a sudden. It's a great feeling. There's a couple other things like that are like color dodge and special effects layers. You can be like working on something and you're like, okay, this is kind of working, like I think I like this, but I'm kind of not exactly sure. And then before you know it, like you add that layer and you're like, it's alive, like Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I'm working a little fast, and I could lose track of my layers when I work super fast. So I'm usually really good about grouping them. So I'm going to go in right now and just kind of make sure that I've grouped everything correctly. Good tool is when you can find the auto select. If there's a layer that's missing, you can realize, oh, that's where that is. You have to use that. That saves my butt all the time, which is great.
Yeah, that's actually a really good tip, because usually I'm like layer hunting, trying to find the layer that I'm looking for, just turning all of my layers on and off. I did not realize that you could do that. That's
Yep.
really helpful.
Auto select is great. And you can also auto select by group. So in the upper left here, when you click on the arrow, you can do auto select, and then there's layer and group. So you can find the group or the layer. I end up with a lot of groups and a lot of layers, but that's a very helpful tool. Just make sure you turn it off again when you're done with it, because it can end up a little you can end up grabbing things you don't want to grab.
Yeah.
Down the line. All right. So now I'm going to start. I like to zoom in and out a lot also when I'm painting. It really helps me to kind of look at things small and see what's working, what's not. I end up kind of pushing and pulling a lot based on how things look when it's all tiny. You want your images to read really nicely, even on a small scale. I think that's a really good thing to do. Sometimes I'll also flip my image, which is good, so I can see what it looks like from the other direction. It kind of gives me fresh eyes as a way to see how things are looking from someone else's point of view. Basically, everything should mostly work both directions.
Yes, definitely. We always on this channel try to remind our viewers to flip their canvas and stretch their wrists, and also take a drink of water, as well as save your work. PSA, everyone, don't forget to save your work if you're working on anything right now while you're watching us.
I'm going to do both of those things right now, because it's very easy to forget. I think we've all had moments where we spend an hour working on something and then it just disappears because, whatever happens, you think you save it, and then you said, no, don't save before closing, and your day is ruined. Yeah, it's a rough time. We've all been there. All right, just adding in some more lighter values to these like distance hills. I think doing these landscape paintings is a really great way to understand space. It's hard in cities or places where we don't see a lot of change in elevation to kind of like to see how atmosphere can affect color and light. So it's really cool getting these photos from places that have a lot of distance between formations, because you can really understand like, wow, like they really pick up the sky color, when they're far away, or, they get lighter in value, or, there's all different kinds of things that can change.
Yeah, I always found that fascinating how like objects like this, for instance, the mountains in the distance are more blue toned, like things that are farther away become more blue toned. And that's actually because of the water molecules in the atmosphere in the sky. The farther things are away from you, the more water molecules are between you and that object. So it becomes more blue toned as the farther it gets away from you.
I never knew that it was that water molecules was actually a part of that.
Yep.
I'm learning new things. I love it. I know that a lot of times you pick up light from the color of the sky. So like the shadow sides of objects like this, the far side would have some blue in it as it reflects color from the sky. But I never thought about water molecules.
Yep. And also, you guys, don't forget, if you are over on YouTube, head over to Behance, because that's where the main party chat is. Behance.net/live. If you have any questions for Isaac or me, feel free to type it over on the Behance chat, and we would love to have you over here. Yeah, so now you're kind of like adding, is this more of like a mid-tone, or is this going to be like the highlight, kind of like adding like the true color?
I think this is more of a mid-tone, a little bit more of a the natural local color, I'd say, like in not a shadow. I think the highlight's going to come in actually really strong at the end, and I'm trying to kind of work in a way to lay that in right now. Figure out a strategy for how I want to bring that in. It changes for everyone, I think sometimes I'll lay it in early. I like to make kind of like a nice shape for it to kind of work within. But it's it kind of depends on how I want the overall. We have this really big bright foreground area, so I'm going to bring actually a lot of this light into the foreground as well. Just need to bring it in right here. Yeah, it's good to make these like big shapes like I started with, because you end up it saves you a lot of time instead of having to go in and paint every little edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very useful tool. I'm kind of building up the composition slowly but surely.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I feel like when you're looking at a real life photo, it can kind of almost feel a little daunting looking at all of these like details and small pieces. But if you kind of, like Isaac was just saying, break it down into more simplistic shapes, that can even just help you not only stylize the image, but also just so it doesn't feel so overwhelming looking at an entire image, just kind of breaking it down a little bit.
There's a lot of noise I find that can be reduced or removed, especially with like trees and little variations in the rock and things like that. You really don't. You should be trying to communicate how something feels, and not so much every little bit of information, because really a lot of that noise should fade away once you end up kind of laying in the big lighting, like the light shapes for the most part. Where like what the shadow side is, what the light side is, all of that is for the most part going to be what gives you the feel. Like you don't really need to focus on little variations, like these like little rocks in here and things like the individual steps. It's so easy to get caught up because it's really easy to render those things and have them look really good because they're high contrast areas. But in the long run, we kind of want to ignore a lot of that and just really get the overall feel of the image. Especially, we do that a lot in animation when we're doing color keys. Color keys are basically how we design the light for a certain shot, and we're really just drawing the mood. There are certain artists that will do extremely graphic shapes. They won't even draw the characters, which is pretty neat. You can get away with a lot because you really just want the people to feel it, not to be shown every little thing. I'm going to start laying in some bright spots here, just so we can get a feel for what we want that overall shape to be once the light hits.
Oh yeah, once you start laying in that lighting, it just like really brings it to life.
Yeah, it starts to get really fun. Like you get to a point where I find that with paintings, there's kind of a hump you have to get over. Sometimes you just look at stuff and you're like, this is not working. Maybe I'll stop and do something else. Like you're not getting that kind of instant gratification. But if you plug away long enough, a lot of times you can really get something pretty rad out of it. But you have to get over that hump of like, okay, what does it like? It could be one brushstroke. Something as simple as one brushstroke could make all the difference. Where just like it starts to communicate where the light side is, what the dark side is, and then you start to feel it. And before you know it, you get in that zone of like, you're just like feeling every stroke, and then it comes alive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do we hear any responses on what parks people like to go to or what places people find inspiring?
I actually don't know. Have any of you guys ever been to any national parks? My husband's family has actually owned property right outside of Glacier National Park in Montana for many, many years, and I've been up there a couple times with them, and it is just gorgeous up there. Love Glacier National Park. It's definitely one of my favorites. I also really love Redwood National Park as well.
Yeah, I've not been to Glacier, but I've been to Redwood National Park. Honestly, they're all good in their own way, and they're so different. Like my first time, if you go to Joshua Tree versus, trying to think what's something that's, the Redwood National Park is basically the opposite of Joshua Tree. Trees versus rocks. It's pretty amazing, the amount of variation. I assume we have a lot of international people who tune into this, so I'd love to get recommendations of like places to travel outside the US. Yeah. A lot of people come here, but there's so many places that are basically all over the world that people get inspiration from. It's pretty neat. You can see it in their work too. A lot of times you'll look at painters from Europe and you'll just kind of like their paint has a different vibe to it. And you're like, what gives it that different feel? And you just realize that they're painting stuff that we've never seen before, which is a really cool feeling.
Yeah, Michelle says they love Death Valley and Arches. Carrie says Yellowstone and Redwoods. Thomas says Yosemite Redwoods blew me away last winter on a road trip. Absolutely. Kara says Glacier, Yosemite, probably others I don't remember. Yeah, they are so beautiful, all of them.
Arches is a great one, and it's a really cool one to explore at night too. If if you're not scared of the dark, a lot of those rock formations, like up against the sky, are just like pretty special looking.
Oh yeah,
really
I'm sure
that stuff. Yeah,
Arches has always been one that I've wanted to visit.
I've been there, I think once. It's a bit of a drive from Los Angeles,
Sure.
but I definitely would like to get back there. I miss going to the East Coast. I'm from the East Coast originally, and I feel like I miss a lot of the greenery. My color senses shifted quite a bit since moving to the West Coast because the color palettes are just so different out here. We don't have, like, there's a lot more purples and things like that here. There's not as much green. Everything is super green over there, which is pretty cool. So I basically made these big shapes for the light, and I'm kind of working some variation right now. Still really loose. Like, I'm not really worried about getting a lot of detail in there. This is just basically some stuff that's still getting light, but it's in shadow. And then I'm going to add in like a real strong highlight a little bit later on, once I get a little bit more definition. But just getting a little bit of noise is nice because you really start to feel the moment. And when you look from afar, it's really starting to kind of take shape, which is nice. You get a feel for that real strong morning light coming on the side there, which is great.
Do you typically always make your highlights warm and your shadows cool toned, or does it depend on the lighting scenario?
I think it depends on the lighting scenario. With natural light, obviously, it's going to be usually, the sun is a warm light, but there are scenarios that are kind of like sunsets. You'll get like reds, depending on what color the sky is. You can get some really neat stuff, or fill lights from like if the sun is not your main light source, then you'll end up with you can get all different kinds of cool colors as well. It is very situational, but also that's the cool thing about illustration and painting in general, is that you can do whatever you want. Like the sky doesn't have to be blue, the grass doesn't have to be green. Like, you can really kind of make stuff however you want and give it your own unique feel. A lot of times you see artists doing like really creative solutions to the natural colors of the world, and it's their own unique interpretation, and it ends up looking pretty cool.
So definitely
don't be tied down to how things look. Like, really, you want to draw how things feel.
that reflected light that you just added right there. Oh, that looks beautiful.
It's funny how there's those little things, then they go in and you're like, oh, okay, like I see where we're going here. This is starting to make sense. What I really want to get by the end of the live stream, I want to get this to feel like it does in the photo, but not really worry about the detail. And then I can go in and maybe like tighten it up and post the final afterwards, because I think getting the feeling is really what I'm trying to illustrate here, more than every little detail.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of Isaac posting, don't forget to follow him over on social media as well. He has an Instagram and he also has a Twitter. And I'm sure Wade will post those links for us in chat, so you guys can head on over there.
Yeah, that would be great. Social media is actually, I think we're very lucky to live in a time of social media for artists, because you can get your artwork out there, really with the push of a button. And back, like when I started, when I graduated from college, which wasn't that long ago, it was only 2009. We were still kind of on the edge of what promotion for artists was looking like. Some of my teachers were still advocating sending postcards to like publishing houses or directors, like with your work on it, to get your work seen. Nowadays, like, I don't think anybody does that. But that's how it used to be. You might like go and show your portfolio, and they would just be like, all right, see you later, and that was it. But now you actually can like keep dialogues of conversation open with people, which is a really cool thing. You can message people with online art communities, and there's just an incredible amount of resources for artists online with Behance and Instagram, Behance. I used to use Blogger back in the day, and now there's ArtStation and all kinds of different websites. I think every artist should have them all
Yeah.
Especially if they don't cost anything. There's no reason to not just load up on, whatever you can do to promote yourself, basically, because it's all good.
Yeah, definitely. And also to add on to that too, I mean, on Behance, we also have the ability to live stream now too, which is really awesome. As we can see right now, we are currently live streaming to you guys. And you can also live stream on your own personal channel as well. And it's just really awesome to be able to be so candid with your viewers and fans of your work and stuff like that, and just like be able to help people learn artwork and be able to teach just live on a stream like we are right now. It's such a cool piece of technology that we're able to use.
So what I'm doing now is it's going to look a little funny, but I want to make almost a stencil of where I want the really bright highlights to go. I want to kind of pick out these moments that are a little bit unique. And what I'm going to do is put them in white so I can recognize them, and then I can use them as kind of a stencil. And I'll save them for later when I bring in like the really strong highlight over the top. So I'm just going to add them in right now, just as a way to understand where those hits are going to be. And then I'll put in, sometimes what I'll do is I'll put the highlight in and then I'll turn it off. It's like, okay, I'll save that for later. Like I know it's coming, but it allows me to see where I can add in variation, kind of around it and support where those highlights are going to be. So that's what I'm going to do right now. It's really cool to not make them super opaque. Like if you leave the thing about these rock surfaces, as we said before, is there's tons of variation in them. So you don't really want to have it just be one solid form because it'll throw the scale off. Having these little kind of like inconsistencies, I'd say, is kind of the best way to put it, actually really makes it look like it's a giant, rock face, super far away, instead of having it just be one big clean shape.
Yeah, definitely. It adds a lot of interest in the texture of the rock. You can really kind of get a feel for that, the look of the rock, by just kind of like being a little bit more messy with it rather than filling it in completely.
I do like to give them strong shapes, but keep the variation within. So I'm going to kind of show an example of that. A good way to do that might be like if you want to give yourself like a selection, like you can kind of make an interesting shape like this and then draw within it. So you'll get the variation, but you still have like that really cool edge shape. Like you'll kind of see how that ends up like that. I actually like how that looks. So I think I'm going to do that a little bit more. What I'll do is I'm going to erase this and just kind of redo that with a strong edge. That way we have the same look consistent like throughout. Yeah, I love the selection tool. The selection tool is a really, really great way to give yourself clean lines.
Yeah.
You could spend hours, just like erasing every little edge, but when you do it this way, you end up getting these like really cool bold shapes. And shape is I think shape is just as important as color and light. Like those are the three things that I focus on the most, I think, in pretty much all my work. So yeah, you can see we have a bit more of a graphic shape now, instead of just one little. Yeah, I'm gonna do one here as well. I'm kind of cheating. I feel like this is kind of the part that I usually leave till last because it's so much fun. But I feel like doing this stuff is helpful because it gives you an idea of where you're going. And it just, whatever you can do to keep your paintings fun. A lot of times when you're working on paintings, it'll take multiple sittings. Like you'll have to come back and work on it later. And that can be really difficult because a lot of times when you have to stop, you're not really in a place where it feels good. Like you'll come back to it and you're just like, oh, there's so much to do. Like, I really just want to work on this a little bit. I'd be curious if any of the people who are listening have kind of like strategies in place to help them get through like really big paintings. What I do is I try and stop at a point that's really fun. And then that way, when I start, the first thing that I'm going to be working on is really fun. And it's something that I can finish in like a minute. And that way I get that like instant gratification where I'm like, yes, okay, I'm in it again. Like it kind of just like takes me right back in it really quickly.
That's actually really clever. It kind of leaves you wanting more, leaves you wanting to paint more.
Yeah, if I step away when it's like just an underpainting, I'm gonna never finish it. I have dozens of PSDs on my computer that are just like sitting there with no hope of ever being finished because I stepped away at
Mm,
the wrong time. But it's good. I think the more you work, the more you get in tune with who you are, like as a creative, and you start to understand those things. Like that's
yeah.
the stuff that's really, really hard to do, and it just takes time to get to know that about yourself.
Thomas is asking, did you mess with gouache in college or was it always all digital?
Oh yeah. So this is actually quite funny because I had a lot of teachers that would yell at me for not working digitally. I would use gouache. I had a huge gouache collection
Mm,
and I would use it in such a manner where I was using like really solid colors, and like really crisp lines. Like I was really into graffiti. So I wanted everything to be like really, really clean looking, and they would just tell me like, why are you not working digitally? Because what you're doing is trying to achieve the same look. It just takes you, 5 times as long. But I had a lot of pride about not going digital for a long
mm.
time. And then once I finally got my hands on a Cintiq, I was just like, what have I been doing? It just takes so much longer. However, there is a certain magic with using like more traditional mediums. But it's just nowadays with the rapid needs of like production, especially in animation, it's really difficult to, find a way to work in traditional mediums to, our workflow, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. I've always really loved the look of gouache. I think the flat matte texture that it has is so beautiful. I don't have a ton of experience with traditional work, but I have definitely in the past couple of years tried to push myself to work more with traditional artwork, just simply for personal pieces, just because I really love the look of it.
Yeah, that's one thing that I do kind of get a little bummed about is that when I'm doing a lot of digital work, I don't feel like I have a tangible result sometimes,
Hmm.
and that's a really good feeling to be able to hold your work. So for digital artists, I would strongly recommend printing your work, to be able to hold your work in your hand is kind of like a really cool feeling, and a lot of us don't like we can't do that via the computer screen. So even if you've done it digitally, take the time to get your work printed and hang it on the wall, and it ends up feeling pretty special, at the end of the day. So you can get still, even when you're working digitally, you can still get that same pride and feeling of creating a physical object, but you just got to print it out.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. Kara says, didn't go to Arches, but have driven just north of it, and Utah is stunning. I have never been to Utah, but I would love to go.
Yeah, it's basically a dream come true for landscape painters out there. It's pretty amazing. Every time I go, I wish I painted more.
Yeah. Wade says, if I'm stepping away to come back fresh, I like to flip the canvas and not look at it until I come back. When I come back, I always find areas to work on.
Oh yeah, that's the trick. Sometimes it's a really difficult thing to do. I feel like it almost takes a lot of maturity as an artist to be able to do that, because you're inevitably going to find things that are wrong with with
Yes.
what you've done, or not necessarily wrong, but just like stuff that can be improved. So it takes guts, like it for sure takes guts to do that. And a lot of people definitely struggle with, even myself, like when you draw something, it's like you just want it to be done, like you don't really want to have to change it or anything. You just kind of want to move on to the next one. But getting that kind of feeling of, okay, I'm willing to take feedback, mid painting, and then see what comes after that. I think it's a good thing to be able to do. It ends up, you always end up getting stronger work in the long run.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult thing to do for sure.
Richard says, I always leave something quick to do next time I open a project. I know that helps me get back into it.
Yeah, that's the move. That's my move anyhow. Sometimes, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Everyone has their own thing. Sometimes I find the other thing that gets me into it is if I just find a good story to listen to, if I just have something that just keeps me like just kind of gets me feeling cozy at my desk like right away, then I'm like, I'm in it right, you know, immediately. I'm adding in some little trees here, but these are just going to be the shadows. There's no highlights on these yet. I'm going to try and give them some cool shapes. But when you look at it from afar, you don't really see much of them. So I'm not going to worry about really defining them too much because they are kind of just noise that's on the ridge.
Adding the perspective on the size of the trees really helped with the dimension and the perspective on how close this foreground really is, as opposed to the peak behind it.
Yeah, it's all about space, you know, like these big mountain scenes, like there's just an incredible amount of space in between elements in your composition. So if you don't put that in, it's really easy for things to just kind of seem too small. And you know, I would rather have less detail and translate the scale than a ton of detail and then not be able to really communicate how big you know, the surface is.
Yeah, absolutely. Scale is always so important in composition.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that kind of drew me to this scene overall, is just the composition. I felt was really fun. The land formation itself has this really cool swoop in it. And it brings you, like, you kind of, when you're hiking to the top, for those who don't know, you actually don't see it at all until you're pretty much there. You're basically going back and forth for, you know, I'd say an hour on these like 25 switchbacks, and you don't see anything. And then you kind of come up over the top, and then you're presented with this view where it's like, there's the last quarter mile. You get a really, really big panoramic view, and it's a real special moment. So you can see this even if you are scared of heights or you don't really want to go all the way to the top. You can hike up there and kind of catch this view of Angel's Landing as a pretty cool special moment.
Yeah, for sure. Michelle said, how do you feel about your work when it's done? Do you love it, or are you already moving on to the next drawing and not really thinking about the work you just finished?
Oh, this is such a loaded question for artists because honestly, the truth is I like a good portion of my work. But I don't feel like it's a super winner for long. Like usually about a week in, I look at it and I'm like, okay, on to the next one, you know, moving on. It's kind of a bummer, but it's also exciting because when you start to feel that, you understand that that's how much you grew from when you started it to when you finished the piece. And that's a pretty cool feeling. You're already better than you were when you started the piece, and that's a really cool thing. So it's both a blessing and a curse when it comes to you know, appreciating your own work. I hear that's a very common thing for artists, is just kind of, you love your work and then a little bit down the road you're like, okay, scrap it, move on to the next one.
Yeah, I used to despise looking at my old work, but as I've grown a little bit older and I've learned to appreciate my old work, even if I don't like it anymore, because like you just said, that just simply means that I have grown in my skill as an artist. If I don't necessarily like it, that means that my eye for artwork has improved.
Yeah, and save everything though. Don't just because you don't like something, it's so amazing to be able to look back and see where you've come. So don't like throw out old drawings. Like, it's really good to keep that stuff. That's one thing that digital artists really have, you know, I'd say as an advantage over traditional artists. Like, if you're painting, you know, you don't necessarily have room to keep, you know, your however many 45 canvases you've worked on, you know, in the last year. Like that, you run out of space real quick. So the fact that we can just have a hard drive filled with art is pretty amazing. Like, we're really lucky that we can have that. But always back up your work too.
Yeah. External hard drive.
Yeah, multiple ones if you can. It's very important. So I'm going to add in some little shadow details here, because again, you know, we know there's so much variation in these surfaces. You know, you really got to communicate that it's not just all one big light spot. There's really a lot going on in these little areas, and these little details don't look like much when they're up close. You know, this is all super rough. Like, this really isn't polished at all. But when I'm kind of banking on when the last like light effects go in, like it's just gonna all kind of come together and feel like you'll really feel that morning light. And that's what I'm trying to go for in this.
Yeah, every little line detail that you add in like just makes it more look like a rock.
Yeah. I know rocks are kind of like the most fascinating thing to paint because they're everywhere, but they're really cool.
Yeah, there's so many
can,
different variations of the texture too.
They can look so different depending on where you are in the world, like the climate and everything. And that's pretty cool. I mean, it's like, oh, I'm just painting a rock, but then you look at landscape paintings, you know, throughout history and like all the great ones, and you're like, yeah, they're really just painting like a bunch of rocks and trees. Like that's really all they're that's all they're focused on. But they have such different styles and so many like different qualities of light and everything between how they handle all those different formations that it really does a lot. You know, it says a lot about a very simple formation, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
And don't mind my layers being a total mess right now, because I know I'm not setting any kind of a good example for layer organization right now.
I'm pretty sure every single guest on Adobe Live says that same exact thing.
Well, it's funny because I think we all have like goals of being this super organized artist who just like, you know, yeah, like, you know, I have groups and folders and everything is labeled and whatever. And then it just never seems to work out that way.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it goes. Yeah, so this is feeling, it's like I'm starting to feel like I am seeing where this is going. So I'm going to allow myself some time to kind of work into these areas that I haven't touched. I haven't really touched a lot of the left side or the background or really quite a lot of it. So I'm going to work into some of those more subtle areas right now to give variation. And I think that'll kind of help balance the composition as a whole. Because right now I put a lot of love into this area, but I want to really feel that space everywhere else. So I'm going to go in with some more subtle color variations into some of these other areas. And that I think will help kind of bring this out a bit more, which will be nice. I'm always switching brushes constantly. Try not to use the same one too much.
Ria says, I want to create old artwork that I made when I was a kid. Have you ever recreated old artwork before, Isaac?
Yes. It's a really cool thing to do. It's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, because I feel like you do want to move on. Like you don't always want to just keep rehashing the same ideas. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't ideas worth rehashing, because I know there's work that I've done and I've looked at it and like, oh, I really love this idea, but the execution was just kind of, you know, not great. Maybe I can redo this. And that's a really good thing to do when you're struggling for inspiration, when you're just kind of, you're not really sure what to draw. That's another great reason to kind of hold on to some of your old stuff, because when you look at your old work, you'll get ideas and you'll just be like, oh yeah, like this, I'm going to do this differently this time, you know, and it's going to be a success, you know, or whatever. So I think that rehashing old ideas and looking at old work and redoing it is kind of a fun way to measure, you know, how far you've come and just kind of get a heat check on where you are as an artist. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you don't want to do it too much. Like you don't want to just keep rehashing the same piece in your portfolio like every year. Like that's probably not how you want to go about things in the long run.
Yeah, sometimes I'm personally, honestly, just curious about how an old piece might look with like my current skill level. So I'll just go ahead and repaint it. And it always interests me to see how much my style or skill level has changed when it's such a slow burn, your skill level as an artist. It just like slowly over time changes, and you usually don't notice those changes until you really go back and like analyze how you used to draw compared to now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Another thing that I really like to do as a way to get inspired or also push my boundaries is do collaborations with other artists. Sometimes I'll see like a sketch that someone else did and I'll just be like, man, that's really cool. And I'll reach out to them and be like, can I paint that drawing you did? Or, you know, or would you be interested in, you know, doing a trade where I paint something of yours, you paint something of mine? Artists love doing that stuff. And it's a really good way to get to know artists who you might not really have a chance to meet otherwise. And And also by working over their stuff, it kind of gives yourself a chance to see how they think, which is pretty fun, and you can learn a lot from it. So that's another kind of like secret weapon I have in terms of like trying to find ways to inspire myself.
Yeah, that's actually a really great idea. And being able to like find community members in like the Photoshop Discord channel, for instance, like that would be a great way to just like go in there and say, hey, you know, like, is there anyone that's interested in collabing with me? Like, and just kind of connect that way, or through social media, Instagram, you know, Behance.
There's so many artists out there. Like I always think like, oh, maybe I've found all the artists that I really like. And then I'll just discover like, oh my God, Poland is like a breeding ground for inspiration. And then I'll go on like a deep dive. And it's just amazing how many working artists there are really out there, because there's no shortage of talent out there. That's for sure. I'm gonna get rid of my sketch now because I don't really need it anymore. I've had my sketch kind of overlaid at the top this whole time. But it's not, you know, I've got enough detail in there that it's not really super necessary. Yeah, I like to keep it on for a while, but once I've got a good amount of information, it kind of just becomes superfluous. Use a big word there.
Anthony says, I'm pretty sure most of our layers are not organized, so you're not alone there, Isaac.
Thank you for your support. I appreciate it. It makes me feel good. Yeah, I think, you know, for production on animated features and stuff, like we have to do these massive files, and we end up making a lot of changes, and then sometimes we have to pass the files off to artists who might not even speak the same language as us.
Oh yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you just feel a lot of guilt. You're like, man, I really should have organized this better. So I'll go in at the end of a piece and just kind of have an hour of like cleaning up a file and just making it more a little bit more eye friendly for someone who doesn't really know what I did. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to do, especially if it's a file that you might want to use for something in the future.
Yeah.
Just cleaning it up a little bit is good. Yeah. I'm going to leave these background hills mostly just like kind of one big shape. I don't really want to put too much detail in there because they're really not something we want to be looking at. I'd really like for them to end up blown out. We have this like really cool flare of the sun coming over the hill, and that's what I'd like to do as kind of like my last polish item. So I'm going to add like some really subtle variations, but really for the stuff in the background, you know, that really shouldn't be drawing my eye very much.
Right.
So I'm not going to worry about adding too much information back here.
That's definitely something that I personally struggle with, is forcing myself to not put detail like in things that are farther away, to keep all of your most of your detail in the focal point. And it takes a lot of self-discipline for me to not add a ton of detail to every little thing.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to do. I think that's especially when you are working. I know when I first kind of started out, I would find a moment in the painting that I really liked, and I would just like render it like crazy. And then I'd be like, oh man, I really overdid that. So when you are really detail oriented like that, like you just kind of have to figure out ways to rein it in. A good way is to constantly move around. If you can even give yourself a time limit, like, okay, don't work on any one section for more than a minute, you know, then keep it moving. That's a great way to kind of break that habit if you can. Does anyone else have ways, or does anyone else find themselves doing that, where they just like overwork something like crazy and then realizing, you know, they can't save the rest of the composition because of how much they worked on the one area?
Oh yeah.
I'm sure we're going to get some people saying, oh yeah, I do that all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's another reason why it's great to keep your image zoomed out too, rather than zoomed in the whole time. You're so focused on one little space. That's a great point. Yeah, keeping zoomed out is another good way to do it. I'm basically changing my colors here. I think they're popping a little bit. It's like a little bit too much, and I want it to recede more because I really want to be able to see this nice like swoop area. So I'm just gonna bring in quite a bit more of this and see if I can get it to fall into the background a bit better. You almost kind of like adding fog into the background there to kind of make it a little less vibrant.
Yeah, I end up, right now, because of the live, I end up working in the dark pretty often because it allows me to see my screen quite a bit better. Right now, I actually have a lot of light because I want people to be able to see my face. So it gives me some reflections on my screen, which make it a little bit difficult to kind of like pull out these really dark, like when the values get really close, like I'd say, 10%, within 10% of one another, you have to have really good conditions in order to basically make sure you can see exactly the difference between all the little details. I'm going to go in and put some highlights in here because I think I'm ready for it. A nice warm green over the top, and I'm going to leave it really big and loose just because. So that should start to communicate that nice warm light coming over the hill here, and we'll leave the shadows nice and dark.
Yeah, that
These can get brighter up here.
Nice contrast between your really bright highlight and really dark shadow. That's really nice.
Yeah, I think you can really, when you're painting, I try to stay within like 3 values for each thing. I don't really want to go over that because it just tends to be overworked. If I can keep, 3 values per item, like a dark, a mid, that's really what I'd like to do. That's an ideal scenario for me. So I'm going to add some little shape variation though to kind of help communicate scale. Let's see if that works. It's a little hard to see with my selection on right now, but I'm going to just kind of do it anyway and see how it looks. Yeah, it's getting there. And then we're going to do, let's see what's next. I'm getting to the point where I can kind of just hop around and do whatever I feel like, which is nice.
What brush are you using for the highlights here?
So this is the Kyle's Ultimate Pastel Palooza. It's a really cool big brush. I'm going to just make a mark on the top. I like it for foliage because you can kind of have these very organic. It's easy to get organic shapes. So what I'll do often is I'll do something like make a shape and then use a big brush on the inside. So you get the organic edge on one side, and then so this is a pretty awesome way to work. I really enjoy doing this, and then maybe I can actually bring some of that in. You can bring some shadow. This is like a little mini demo. So that would be a really nice way to get some like hard edged foliage but still some noise in it.
Very cool.
Yeah, I love using that brush. I typically only use really big brushes within a selection. This stuff is a little organic for me. I think I'd really like to go in and kind of cut these a bit more and refine their shapes, but that can be a bit time consuming. And I'd like to get this to a point where it actually looks pretty good by the time the end of the day or the end of the session comes along. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep working on this area over here and kind of put some more detail in. There's a lot left to do over here, so I'm gonna put some love into it. I'm already losing layers. There we go. Oh, I moved it. There you go. When you're working fast, things can get a little hairy.
How long do you typically spend on one single illustration like this?
It varies. I'd say for myself, if I'm like in the zone, and I can get a painting done in about, I would normally allot myself about 2 hours for something like this. But that's if I'm not like talking or focused on anything else at the same time. If I was to do this where it was like a production painting, it would be much, much more. I think it would probably end up being like a full day to get because there's a lot of things I'm leaving really rough right now. And I think when you are really developing something to have a very specific look and feel, you really want to have I would be considering every little rock shape, where every little detail, and that kind of stuff takes a lot of thought. Even if the act of painting isn't that really that I'd say it isn't that labor intensive. It's the thought that goes behind it, because it's kind of like a measure measure twice, cut once kind of thing. You just want to make sure that everything's really feeling how you want it to feel, and that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add a color effect here because I think it's gonna look pretty good. I love to use color dodge. Color dodge layers are super fun. I don't typically use them on the very saturated range, like on this side. I usually will just give it a little bit of color on the left side, and it just really gives a nice feeling of light. That's a little bright for me. I'm gonna go.
That added so much warmth. Yeah,
it's a secret. It's one of those just like secret tricks where if you work with Photoshop layers a lot, you start to understand, okay, like I see where this is going.
Yeah.
You know, and you just know that it can come in over the top and give you some really nice, what it does is it blows out your highlights quite a bit. And I can turn that off. I think what I'm going to do is, let's see. So I'm going to label that layer color. That way I don't forget where that is, because that's a really important one. You end up working over the top of those things quite a bit. If you use a lot of adjustment layers, it can be a really good thing, but it can be dangerous because your PSDs can get very wild. And if you paint over the top of your color adjustments, a lot of times what happens is once you you might need to like turn your adjustment off, and then you can't get the same look again. So be careful with those adjustments, because if you put them too early on, it can be really difficult to kind of wrangle them when you need to wrangle them.
Everyone is very excited about the color dodge you just did.
Yeah, it's so funny how it works like that. It's just like little tiny moments, and before you know it, it comes alive, and then you can start to like put in some some darker shadows and stuff here. And then it's just, that's the thing with painting. And that's why I had something planned today that was going to be a little bit more, I'd say not cut and dry, but more coloring in, and just kind of focusing on how I like to render. But I think the fun thing about watching someone paint is that you can really watch stuff come alive, and there's a bit of a magic to it, which is super, super fun. I think watching painting demos online is a really great thing to do. I'd love to know if anyone has any painting demos they watch, or any artists that they really like to watch paint. I'm always looking for like new recommendations on stuff like that.
Yeah, if anyone has any painting demo recommendations that you guys love to watch that you could recommend to everyone in chat and to us, we would love to hear. Anime Elephant says your art, Isaac, is phenomenal.
Thank you. I'm blushing. I don't know if you can see, but I'm sure I'm blushing.
Nicholas says, thanks for all the info. I'm a freelance traditional artist, but my passion is to become an animator. Thanks for demonstrating your approach with simple techniques.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited because this technique is really different than what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be, I'm going to start with basically a fully rendered scene. And then what we're going to do is light it different ways. So we're going to look at a method to basically take a painting and create different moods and different lighting scenarios with the same painting, which is going to be really, really fun. We have to do that a lot for work. So I'm excited to kind of show you guys that one. I think that's going to be a good time.
That's going to be fantastic.
All right, so I haven't touched this area on the right very much, so I'm going to go in there. Actually, I'm going to bring in, so this is a little bit blown out. I feel like this area is a little too strong right here, so I'm going to bring in a little bit of a darker value right in here and see if that kind of brings it, because you want to have a focus, but you don't want to have, like right now, this is all looking the same. I really want the top to be looking a bit, I think more like, oh, that's the moment. Like, I don't want to be looking in front of us. I want to be looking up there. So I'm going to see if I can bring in some, this is one of those moments where, because I'm working with the color dodge layer, it's going to affect what I put in. So the color that I'm putting in might not necessarily be exactly, like I'm thinking about how the color dodge layer is affecting it, and I'm choosing my color accordingly. It's not, this is not one-to-one. Like the color you guys are seeing is not what I'm actually laying down. So that's where the color dodge gets really tricky. Shaheen is wondering if you only ever paint scenes from photos, or do you kind of come up with your own scenes too? Oh, I definitely come up with my own scenes. You can see a lot of that on my website. There's stuff that is, clearly not from this world. But it's really, I love painting from photos, and I love painting from life. But it just kind of depends on what I'm in the mood for. I think doing a little bit of everything is really a good thing to do, because whatever you do influences the rest of what you do. So if I'm painting from photos today, I know that when I try and do something imaginative tomorrow, all of the information that I learned from painting from photos, I'm going to bring that into when I try and do something, with my imagination. So
that's very true.
All right, I'm going to add another little special effect now because I just feel like doing it, and I can. I make the rules. When you're working for yourself, you make the rules, and that's a pretty fun feeling. So I'm going to try and add another color dodge over here to give us that light coming over. And I'm going to actually probably lay this in and then make some adjustments to it, because you don't always get the right like color and hue and everything right away. A lot of times I'll just go in and do some slider action. Ooh, I'm gonna have to move that to this screen. So once my adjustments open, I can kind of say, oh, I want that to be a little bit more saturated or a little bit darker, or maybe in this case, like a little bit more yellow, a little bit more yellow. So that's one, and then I'm going to bring in another one over the top of it to give it really, because another color dodge layer. Color dodge layer is just my like cheat code for art, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of fun. And you start to really feel that sunlight coming over the top. It's a nice little moment right there. I'm definitely loving it. And then I think maybe up here in the sky, I think we should bring it down a little bit. I think it's too bright on the right. We really want to feel that light coming over from the left. So I'm going to lay in a darker value over the top. I'm going to use, let's try this big one. A little much. I'm not using any hotkeys, so you guys can like kind of see what everything I'm pressing. Hopefully that's helpful. If not, then I can go back to using hotkeys. But I think this is starting to feel like, okay, the light is coming from the left. The right was a little bit too strong, I think, before. And I'm going to bring it over the white as well. So let's bring a little bit more. Yeah. Now we're starting to feel that sunrise moment. That
looks so good.
It's coming along. It takes a little while sometimes, but you just kind of have to massage it. And you start to get that feeling, which is really, really fun. And then this guy, I'm going to go back into here. I kind of put this like green in here for where the trees are, but I haven't touched it at all. So I think we're going to need some variation in there. It's hard because this is super dark. Like if we pick this value, it's way, way down there. So I'm going to just kind of lay in. I mean, I guess that's the darkest. That's as dark as it gets. But I'm going to bring a little bit of variation in there because we don't want it to look like it's a pit. That wouldn't be very attractive. That's not how it is.
Kim is wondering, did you use pure white when you were doing the color dodge for the sun flare, or were you using kind of more of a warm tone?
Yeah, so I like to, I'm going to pull that up again so you can actually see what it looks like. Okay, here we go. So the color dodge layer, I'm going to turn it to a normal layer, and you can see what it actually looks like. So I like to go, I can show you where the color is. This is a little bit saturated. When I actually laid it in, I was over here somewhere, but I ended up making it a little bit more saturated. I don't typically go anywhere in the upper right 25% for color dodge. I think you can get a lot of bang for your buck with going just a little bit of color. But it's, that really depends on how different artists choose their colors and what kind of color palette you use. For me, I don't want it to be super overpowering. I want it to be nice and subtle. But everyone kind of has their own way of working. So you do what feels best for you.
Yeah, that's crazy how dark that color is without the color dodge effect on it. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it's a really powerful tool. It's probably my favorite type of layer to use. But I think what I started with was soft light layers, soft light and hard light layers. Those are great layers as well. But you just I graduated to needing something that has a little bit more punch to it, and the color dodge layers did that for me. So I'm gonna go in and add, because these mountains in the background here should have some light coming over the top. So I'm gonna add that in right now, which should be nice. I'm gonna pull it right from there, pull it right from where that color dodge layer is. So we want that light to be coming over the horizon on these distance mountains as well. Give us some real nice morning. What's cool is with the light coming over, we kind of get a direction of where the shadows are going to be. So we get this, we can start playing with designing the shapes of our shadows. So what's cool about this line is it kind of brings our eye back up here and keeps us in this really nice moment up here like that quite a bit. I think we can tone this yellow down. It's a little bright there. So I'm going to bring that down a bit.
Yeah, a couple of people in chat are wondering if you could go step by step with the sun flare again.
Yeah, sure. Let me go over there 1 second. Okay, so for the sun flare, let's use the auto select, find the layer. Okay, so I'm going to turn it into a normal layer right now, and I'm going to do it again. Okay, so basically I see in this image right here, let's zoom in. We see this really cool sun flare moment where it's just peeking over the edge. We're going to want to have, there's a lot of color variation right here. You can see what these like really nice cool mountains actually turn quite yellow. And I know that when I go in with my color dodge layer, whatever the color is, so let's make a new color dodge layer. We have that right here. I'm going to go with an airbrush. You don't have to use an airbrush. You can use gouache. You can use anything. I'm just going to use an airbrush because it's easy for right now. So I know it's a warm light. So I'm not going to use a blue. I'm not going to use a green. I'm going to go straight to my warmer tones. When I originally did it, I did over here, but after adjusting it, I found myself a little bit more towards the saturated area. So I'm going to choose a warm color that isn't too bright, because I'll show you what happens if I go too bright. So too bright, it's going to blow out quite a bit. And while this is actually kind of close to how it looks in the middle, I'd like some more color variation beforehand. So what I'm going to do is start with something that's a little bit darker, and that's going to give me a bit more of a subtle gradient. I get some like nice variation, but it's not super overwhelming yet. And then I'm going to go create another color dodge layer over the top. You could do this on the same layer, but I like to have them independent. That way I can adjust them as needed, because they're kind of two separate things. So I'm going to do the same process, and then the sun is really right here, and then bring in the other color dodge layer, and then I'm going to see the sun really bright, like right there. That's might be a little much, but let's try that again. So I'm just going to bring it right over the top, so you can see the sun peeking over. And then if you want, I think we're pretty close to white here. Yeah, I mean, it's white right there. So there's not too much room, but grab your sliders, and then I go to image adjustments, hue saturation, and then I can slide it back and forth and see just how much I want. I can go darker, I can go lighter. You can really kind of push and pull it individually to see how you're feeling about it. I think I made it a little bit big, so I'm gonna erase just a little bit around it, because I think it's a little overpowering for those hills right now, but I want it to be subtle.
Yeah.
So you start to see the sun poke over. And also that gives you kind of a direction for if you want to add some clouds. We don't have any clouds in our sky, but there's no reason we can't add some. You don't have to, when you're working from photos, you can do what you want. You don't have to stay by the photo. You can always add more things, which is really fun.
Yeah.
So if we was to add some clouds in there, let's see how we would do that. Work within this shape. I'm gonna just use a nice big brush. Maybe I'll use this one. And then, so the clouds would be, pretty light in color. We could bring something like this. You can use clouds, shadows, things like that are really great tools for changing your composition. If you want to add a little bit of detail or something to move the eye around, adding a cloud or a shadow or something like that is a fantastic way to adjust how things are looking. If your eye is just kind of going off the canvas in a way that you don't want, you can see how that basically is now putting our eye back towards that moment. And I like to do small, medium, large always whenever I can, just not have everything be the same size to add visual interest. So I'm going to do a small one, a medium one, and a large, and that's going to be real nice. I'm going to use the smudge tool even with the same brush and kind of just like give it a little bit of feathering.
Oh wow, yeah.
Which kind of gives it some motion, which is really fun. So it's starting to get like pretty stylized, which is really fun. And you can even add a little bit of like a warm highlight. I'm going to go right here, just on the edge of those clouds, just to make it look like it's getting that morning light. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, so that's fun. I mean, that's not in our reference photo at all, but no one's going to know the difference.
Yeah.
You can totally use your creative license to add things and subtract things all over your composition. That's why we do what we do. We want to make it our vision.
Yeah, for sure. I've always feel like clouds can add so much character to a painting, especially depending on how the artist stylizes them, because I mean, they're just big, fluffy masses. You can do so much with them and they still read as clouds. Like how you chose to stylize them with they're completely flat on the bottom and then they're just kind of like little bumps on the top. Like it adds so much character.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to what we did before with the vegetation, and I'm gonna make some cool shapes off the backside here because there are trees and stuff over there. So I'm gonna use the selection tool to make some little geometric shapes, and then I'm gonna go in and find that nice big brush of Kyle's to add in some texture to make it look like foliage. So I'm gonna use the Kyle's Ultimate Pastel Palooza brush and then make it nice and big so I can work within those shapes, but I have the boundary. Use the shadow color, but I'm gonna make it a little bit cooler because it's on the backside.
Sure.
Then I'm going to add in some, I gotta go actually over the top of all this because I put the sky on top. So this should help to kind of break up that really hard edge we have on the backside. I don't always want to have a super hard edge because it can look not organic. We can it looks artificial. Things in nature have irregularities, and It's important to put those irregularities in. So that's starting to look like there's something going on the backside there, which is which is nice. Bring that in here a bit more. And normally I would refine these shapes, a little bit more. I don't like how they're super perfect. So you can kind of see how they're everyone. So what I'll do is bring my eraser in and just add like a little bit of variation in there. That way they're not too artificial looking. You'd want to have that nice shape, but still bring variation. And then I can bring in a really nice, like, again, super loose. None of this stuff is really that specific, but I want to have what looks to be some like little tree trunks and things like that on the backside. Little details to make this scale read.
It's almost like you're not like adding every single detail in, but just enough to imply that it's there.
Yeah, exactly. You just want it to have a nice like first read, understand that it's there, and then you can kind of refine it as needed. But it's really nice to give us those little shapes to break up that line, which is super fun.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's look for some other moments that we've kind of overlooked in this one. I feel like with this, we're gonna maybe want to add some atmosphere, but in front to push it back a little bit because it's just a little bit flat. So I'm gonna try and add some stuff in there to give it a little bit more oomph.
Do you usually actively check your values as you work, like with a black and white layer, or have you gotten to a point where you don't even need to check your values?
So what I'll do a lot of times is I will actually start with a little black and white thumbnail and kind of have an idea where I want to go.
Mm.
Squinting, looking at it from afar really helps. But it kind of depends on the piece and what I'm going for. Like I will do just a really tiny, kind of like how this reference image is just like in the upper left-hand corner. I'll do something like that with a value key. And then that way I don't really have to worry that I'm going to go too far astray because I have that reminder right there. All right, I'm going to bring this up over the top. Yeah, so that kind of pushes that back nicely, which is good. I think it was getting a little too dark and distracting. And I think I might want to add actually some little highlights on the top there, just because these edges would be picking up like a little bit of sky color.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to reduce this a little bit. Let's bring, I haven't used this brush very much, so let's try this one. Just bring some texture. I think if you do too much airbrush, it can look a little bit artificial. I try and use it a little bit selectively, just because it's so smooth that it can really give you that digital look. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a big brush and then erase a bit, and then I'll use a blur. So I'll go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and that allows me to blur it but still have some organic feel to it, so I don't see these like really obvious airbrush strokes. You can kind of see the difference, so it's a little bit sharp. So noise, it kind of gives me the noise but doesn't add detail. You don't want noise with detail,
right?
You just want kind of like one or the other.
That's interesting. I've never thought about using Gaussian blur to kind of just blur the texture just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really good tool, and it's good for blurring background elements as well. A lot of times I'll just put a tiny bit of blur in the background, and it kind of is really helpful for putting things in the foreground, like separating your foreground and background.
Sure.
It's a really, really helpful thing to do. That's one of those things that is kind of unique to digital painting. Like you can't really blur something super easy when you're working with gouache.
Right.
You have to, once you blur it, there's no undoing it either.
Yeah.
So that's something that digital painting is pretty great for. Definitely want to use all the tools that you have access to.
Rachel in chat is wondering, have you ever done a snow image? Snow is so hard, but they want to see how color dodge would work on snow.
Ooh.
Do you use color dodge on snow?
You can use color dodge wherever you want. It's just kind of, you might adjust the amount of saturation because snow is white. So snow picks up all color.
Yeah.
We could even do like a little side image here and see if we could paint some snow. Should we try that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's try that. I'm going to pause. I'm going to save.
Yes, everyone save your work.
I haven't saved in a really long time, so I'm going to save. And then let's see, let's add a little, that's the wrong. Let's see if we can make like another little mini composition here with some snow. Hopefully everyone that was watching me work on the other one doesn't mind. But I think this could be kind of fun. All right, so
yeah, I think snow is always one of those tricky things that people always want to learn how to do because it, like you said, snow picks up all color. And so like when you're painting snow, you think, oh, I'm going to paint this white. But in reality, it's really never white unless it's like the really bright highlights.
Yeah, so I was just in the snow recently, actually. So I should be able to think about this in a with some recent reference in mind. Let's say that, so snow. Okay, so let's say this is snow in the foreground. Okay, so snow is going to pick up all the color from the sky. So the shadows, like let's say our sky color, I'm going to adjust the sky color a little bit because it's kind of dull right now. So let's make it more saturated, quite a bit brighter, more saturated. Not that saturated. That's a little too much. But yeah, snow is going to be, it's going to pick up that color. So let's add basically something similar to the sky, but a bit brighter. Let's go with this and see how this looks. Okay, so This is the snow. Okay. Now this is like the shade. There's no light hitting this snow, but if we want to have a warm light, so let's have our sky. We have nothing in this scene like at all, which is a little bit difficult way to do this, but let's add a tree line. So to give us some kind of boundary. I'm completely not planning this at all. So this is going to be interesting to see how
on
this
the
comes
fly.
out. Yeah. So, all right, let's say these are our trees.
Sure.
Yeah. Why not? Sure. Art. Okay. I'm going to make them look a little like trees so we can have we know what we're doing a little bit here. It's funny how you just start to lay things in and all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, that looks like something. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So these are our trees, our fake trees, just so we have a ground plane basically. All right. Now we're going to add in the sky, there is sun in the sky, right? So let's make a brighter, we need a direction where the sun is coming. So let's go all the way, actually. Let's just go all the way up to here. Okay, so now we have kind of like a direction. Actually, you can even use color dodge in the sky if you want to. So let's try a little bit of warm light in the sky. I might have overdone the hang tight. This is gonna take a little bit of fiddling here.
Take your time.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to do this because it's a fun way to figure things out. Okay,
yeah.
So let's just leave that like that. Now we have the snow is right here. So color dodge, I'm gonna make a color dodge layer. And if we wanna have a warm light coming across the snow, I'm gonna go, let's try this range here. Color dodge. This is picking up a little bit. It's reading really desaturated right now. Blue's a little tricky. It might be because I'm gonna try a different color. Let's try this. There we go. Okay. Oh, don't want to do that. Okay. So we want a warm color. Now I'm going to adjust my, let's see if we can just like move it around and then see how it affects. There we go. Okay. The color that you're overlaying is not necessarily going to look how you want it. So like if I move it green, like you might find that you have to overlay a green to give yourself a yellow, or you might have to overlay a purple to give yourself a red. It kind of depends on what your base color is. So the fact that I was overlaying the color that I thought I was getting, but I wasn't getting the right, I kind of wasn't getting the look that I wanted, kind of showed that I need to do some sweet slider action. So I added a little bit of light in it, but let's bring in something really bright now. Let's bring in a really, like, this is going to be our light.
Oh yeah, adding in the drop shadow for the trees added a lot to it.
Yeah, this is a little bit, it depends if we wanted to do something like a little bit later in the day, then we get a lot more purple. So, but yeah, with snow, it really picks up the sky color. You're going to get these like super bright whites when it's getting direct sunlight like this. But the shadows are going to be blue because they're going to pick up the sky. So this is a little bit of a hairball solution here. I feel like maybe it would have been better to do purple because then you get nice like, yeah, there we go. Okay. Sometimes you just have to fiddle with things a little bit to have them start to look real. Maybe we'll do a purple scenario after this. Are there people wanting to do color dodge in like how are they picturing doing color dodge? Do they want to see the color variation, or is it just the fact that you can use it to make a highlight?
Yeah, how are you guys looking? Is it more so like the color that you're struggling with, or is it like where to put the color dodge lighting on the snow? Let us know.
Yeah, I'm curious because there's other ways to do it. A really cool way I like to use color dodge. Let me see if I can come up with a scenario here. So if there's a surface, and I'm going to make, this is going to be very, very basic. I really like to make color variations on the edge of shadows. So let's say we have, here we go. We have a plane, and I'm going to put a shadow, or a highlight rather, right here. So this is going to be a very angular highlight. I'm going to use a color dodge layer to do it. So let's do kind of right here, and then we're going to make a color dodge layer. Okay, so this is going to be our, let's make it a little more saturated. This is going to be our highlight, where there's a direct cast shadow. Maybe there's like an open door or something like that. And then, so what's really cool is this is the shadow coming from an open door. And I'm going to do another color dodge layer over the top of it with maybe a little bit of a warmer light. And you get these really cool glow effects around the edge of the light. So this could be snow, like this could be snow at night, you know, or any basically light colored surface. And you get these really awesome color variations. I think they call it chromatic aberration.
Right.
So you can really get a sense that this shadow is, this key light is glowing. You know, that's really what you want. And then let's go back into this. And then I can add some bounce light on the wall with the same color dodge on the wall. So maybe it really looks like it's bouncing up.
Oh,
there.
yeah. That's awesome.
And then you have, you know, it's a really cool trick to just kind of really give it a glow. You know, soft light layers are helpful, but I find that they don't quite have enough oomph to them, for lack of a better word. Color dodge really gives you that oomph. So yeah, this is a great tool. I'm going to be using this more tomorrow. I try not to use the color dodge layers too much for the type of paintings that I'm doing right now, because they're just they're kind of the icing on the cake. But they are a super, super helpful tool. This is a good the shadow, like the angular shadow, is kind of how I like to use them. So going back to this guy, I'm going to put some more color dodge on this rock on the left here.
Awesome. Thanks for that demo, Isaac.
Yeah, there was a little short. What I'll probably try and do is have a little snow demo for tomorrow when I'm a little bit less on the spot and I can think about it.
Yeah.
But snow is super, super fun. We looked at that one piece that I did with the kind of nice A-frame in the snow. And that was a really fun, you know, example of using, you know, colored light in snow. So I'll try and do some more of that for tomorrow. It's a really fun thing to do.
I love the nighttime lighting in that scene. Looks really great. Yeah,
I'm a sucker for like glowing things, and glowing things at night are just kind of pretty much the funnest thing you can draw, for me anyhow. You can see that in a lot of my work as well. And add some highlights over here.
Jessica says, I want to go snowboarding there in your little snow scene.
Me too. Has anyone even been snowboarding this year? I mean, I feel like there's not really much for anyone to do. I don't know if you can safely go snowboarding or not, but I definitely miss it.
Yeah, I've never been snowboarding. I've always wanted to learn. But my husband and I actually did just go up to Mount Hood in Oregon. We went snowshoeing just last week or the week before. That's always a lot of fun. So I was just in the snow too, actually.
That sounds like a good way to get away from people.
Yes. Go out on a random trail and just go snowshoeing. You're the only people out there. All you can hear is the snow falling. Oh, it's so relaxing.
Just make sure you tell someone where you go.
Yes.
You don't want to disappear and then have people to come look for you.
Yes, of course.
That reminds me of another good podcast that I like to listen to, actually. I like the Outside Online podcast.
Mm.
They have some really good kind of survival stories, which is a super fun thing to listen to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's a thing that'll get your blood pumping as you're drawing,
for sure.
if that's what you're into. Some people need more mellow experience. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep adding some highlights in here and give it a little bit more crunch, a little more detail. It's coming along.
Right. Sweet. We got about maybe 5-ish minutes.
Right. Any questions from people?
Yeah. Do we have any last minute questions that we have for Isaac before we have to, start wrapping up for the day? And then we'll be back tomorrow as well for another lighting tutorial.
Anything and everything. Career advice. Can't do portfolio reviews because I can't see your.
Right.
Especially anyone who's interested in getting into animation or has any animation specific questions. Would love to answer those.
How long have you been doing animation?
I've been working full-time in animation now for 4 years. I've been freelancing for longer, but I worked in games for 6 years before that. So all in all, I've been moving around for 10, 11 years. It's been a long time. It goes by quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, my throat is dry. Kim was wondering, where can you find more of your tutorials? Do you do any YouTube tutorials or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a Gumroad, which you can find linked on all my social media. If you find me on Instagram, there is actually a link in my bio. So I have some digital painting tutorials and also a breakdown of basically how visual development artists work in animation. So you can find all that there. And I believe if you use the code Happy Holidays, you'll get 20% off.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I forgot that I hadn't turned that off yet. So let's just keep it going.
Yeah, there you go. Special stream premium right there.
Yeah, I'll try and maybe for everyone who tunes in tomorrow, I'll actually try and set up something specific for all the followers.
Yeah, there you go.
Who's tuned in for these live streams.
Emily says, what advice would you give for recent grads who are looking for work in this field or just starting out?
The good thing about art is that we're actually booming. Animation, there's a big need for animation. So don't be discouraged. I'd say try and do a little bit every day to promote yourself. Don't give up, and just slow and steady wins the race. It's a big world out there and there's enough work for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Working on the shadow side over here to kind of push it back now.
Fairy in chat is wondering, how do you know where the highlights should be painted on a subject?
You think about where the sun is hitting it. You want the sun to be your guide. So look at where, if we look at these, basically anywhere where the sun is going to have direct contact with the surface, that's where we're looking to put those bright highlights. You don't want everything to be equally bright, but anything that has the angle where it's completely the most perpendicular to the sun is going to have the brightest highlight. So these edges right here on the side of the rock are going to be brighter than the stuff that's on the top, because the top stuff is actually facing the sky. It's picking up sunlight, but it's coming across the surface. It's not actually hitting it straight on. So anything like right here, like this surface right here, these little edges are facing the sun. These little edges are facing the sun. The stuff on the top, the light is coming across. So that's kind of how you're going to determine where your brightest highlights are going to go.
Awesome. Edward said, did you always know that you wanted to do art and animation, or did you at any point have to make a career change?
I'm very lucky. I grew up in a family of artists, so I always knew that I wanted to do art. However, I discovered animation late in my junior year of college. And when I discovered animation artists, I discovered the Avalanche software blog, which was like Sam Nielsen, Ryan Wood, I think Mel Milton. These guys were super, super talented. And as soon as I saw their work, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I wasn't in an entertainment design program, but I saw the work and the work spoke to me. And that's how I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, we are going to need to start wrapping up here. So if you could give us like a little like just a reminder of what we're going to be working on tomorrow, and then also let everyone know where they can find you on social media and all that. And yeah, thank you
Yeah.
guys so much for watching too.
So tomorrow we're going to be working on basically a pre-rendered scene, and then we're going to create different lighting scenarios based on adjustment layers so we can make a night and a day scene from the same painting. So that's what we're going to be working on tomorrow. And you can find me on social media, at Isaac Orloff, on all social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, any of them. And I usually will respond to any messages that you send me. So if you want feedback, send it over.
Yeah, feedback. If you guys have any extra dying questions that didn't get answered on chat, feel free to message Isaac, and I'm sure he'll be able to respond to that. And yeah, don't forget to tune back in tomorrow for the second half for that lighting tutorial at 9:30 a.m. PST. And thank you all so much for watching. Please stick around for the next stream as well. We are going to be doing the AI Daily Creative Challenge. And yeah, thank you all. Chi, Andre, Edward, Emily, Vanessa, Bruce, Kim, Ferry, Bryce, thank you all so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.